Mastering your music can feel so confusing, and I used to watch endless tutorials which were just way too technical. And when I then tried to copy their complex master chains, I'd just spend hours making tweaks and not really hearing any major improvements. It just left me feeling confused and even more frustrated. But then I saw this video of John Summer and he explained how simple his master chain is. And that's when it all clicked. So I decided to build my own straightforward setup based on that. My name's Ben, I make house music, and in my first year releasing I gained some great streams and radio plays. And in this video I'm going to show you my exact master chain so that you can get your songs released ready or polished enough to confidently send to a record label. First I'm going to explain the chain, and then we'll put into practice by jumping in the door and mastering one of my tracks. Okay, so the master chain is really simple. We're going to start off with an EQ, and this is just to make some small boosts or cuts to the overall sound, but not too much at this stage because most of that should have been really done in the mixing stage. So this is mainly just for managing tone. Then we're going to add on a saturator, and this is going to add some warmth to the sound, but it's also going to increase the volume. Then we've got a limiter, and this is going to increase the volume. And then we need a loudness monitoring tool. So I use the Youlean Loudness Meter, which I'll show you in a second. And that's to measure the LUFS. So you might see on Spotify that they suggest -14 LUFS, but in practice what's really common for house music is aiming for about somewhere between -7 to -8 LUFS. So that's what we're going to go for today. Some people do add a compressor in either before the EQ or just after the EQ, but for me I like to do most of my compression in the mixing stage. So if the mix is nice and clean and you've done a fair amount of compression there and the overall song is sounding good, then we can ignore this one in the master chain, which keeps it really nice and simple. Okay, so let's put all this into practice and master this track. So here's one of my songs that I self-released, and what we're going to do is, firstly, we just want the whole song to be about -5 dB in volume, and that basically gives us enough headroom to do some mastering and add on some plugins. So the way I do that is I highlight all the tracks, I come over to this view, I play the song, have a look at where the master is peaking. So mine's about -0.30, so that's quite high. I want to bring that down a little bit. So all I do is just pull all of the volume levers down at once, and yeah, aiming for about -5, -6, so that looks about spot on, perfect. So now this song's ready for mastering. Here's my master chain. We've got the compressor, EQ, saturator, limiter, and the Youlean Loudness Meter. I'll put a link in the description to this one. It's a free plugin to download, and it just measures the LUFS, which we're going to use to make sure we're getting the right volume later. So I used a fair bit of compression within the mix, so I'm not actually going to use this compressor within this master chain, but I'd probably have it either here or after the EQ if I was going to use it. What I would do is, if it needed a little bit of compression at this stage, I'd play the song, I'd reduce the threshold a little bit, you can increase some of this makeup, and I'd probably add the soft clip on since we're mastering, which it helps to manage the peaks but just in a less aggressive way than a limiter would. So like I said, I'm not going to use this one in this master, but that's what I would do if I felt like it needed a little bit of extra compression. So moving on to the EQ, like I said before, this is just to get, just to make a few changes to the tone of the track if I feel like it needs it, and they're really subtle tweaks at this point. Some people you'll see put cuts at the low and the high end, and other people will leave it as a straight line. I've done both. It doesn't really seem to make a difference to me, so I'm just going to leave it as a straight line for now. So I'm going to play the track again, and I'm just going to get a feel to see if it needs anything. Sometimes it might not, depends how good my mix is really. Okay, I feel like it needs maybe a little bit of a boost in the kind of highs or mid-high area here, and then potentially a little bit in the low end, but only small amounts. And then you can test it without, test it with, and basically if you're happy with it, then that's all I'd really do at that point. Now what we want to do is start thinking about bringing the loudness up to the level that we want it to compete with all the other tracks out there. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to pull up the loudness meter, and then we're just going to loop this section of the track And when you're doing this, it's a good idea to kind of have control of your volume on your monitors or your headphones, because you're about to raise the volume quite a lot. So I'd probably start by turning it down, and then as it gets louder, you're going to be able to hear it a little bit more. So all we're going to do is we're going to play the track, and we're going to raise this saturator until we hear some distortion, probably about there. And then you pull it back from there a little bit, because you don't want that distortion at that point. And then, so we're already at minus 8.7 there. Let's see if this limiter pushes a little bit further. And then let's test that section again. Good, so we're somewhere between minus 7.6 and minus 8.3, which is perfect. That's all we need at this stage. So the thing with LUFS is that it doesn't always work to just look at one section of the song, because it looks at an average sound throughout the entire track. So what I'd usually do next is, now I've got it to the level that I think sounds good, I will play the track from start to finish and then check this number at the end of that and see if it sits on the same level that we want. If it does, then that's pretty much it. If it doesn't, then you might need to tweak around the limiter and the saturator a little bit more. It might mean that you need a little bit of compression, or if you're still struggling to get the loudness, then it might be going back into the mix and adding some compression or limiting to some of the instrument buses or some single layers, depending on what you've got going on in the track, and then coming back to the master and retrying. But if you're doing all these things and you're getting it to the right LUFS, then that's pretty much it. I just leave it at that. So what I'll do is I'll take it back a little bit and we'll take the master chain off, and you can hear it before and after. So this is before. Okay, I hope you found that helpful, and I think one of the main things to remember is why we're doing it, and it's usually to either release your music yourself or you're trying to send it to a record label. So you're basically just trying to make the song sound as good as possible for either of those two reasons. So instead of making it super complicated or getting confused in the process, keep it nice and simple, get the tracks finished, and it's going to make your life a lot easier. And for anyone that wants to get involved with this channel a little bit more, I do have a mailing list, the link's in the description. I'm going to be sending out some emails every couple of weeks with just some tips and workflow advice for producers. So if you like the sound of that, then sign up, it's totally free, and I'll catch you on the next video.